I'm sure they were looking for, clearing parking lots. We have a variety of SWAT teams out and assets out clearing the entire airport to make sure it's safe. So just doing their job, working very hard and diligently.
Mr. Daly? I mean, it's Friday afternoon. I mean, about how busy was the airport? Is this the busiest it is during the week, given that it's Friday afternoon, sort of the height of tourist season?
The airport's always very busy. We're one of the fastest growing airports in the country. So again, the terminals are very full right now. Our passengers are sheltered in place. We'll be working with law enforcement to actually get them released systematically, as the sheriff has indicated, terminal by terminal, to make sure that folks are able to exit safely as they proceed with their clearing duties.
Do you have any idea how many people are secured either across the runways, in the terminal, on the plane? Any estimate as to that number?
Right now, we actually have everybody in either at the terminals, or we've had some airplanes that have landed, that we still have airplanes with people on board that have landed that have not been brought into the terminal building. It's possible that those airplanes may actually depart and not actually come into the terminal building. But on any given day, we typically handle between 80 and 100,000 passengers coming through the facility.
So people who are on planes now may not be able to get off? Is that?
That's a possibility, that we're working with the airlines, that some decisions may be made. It hasn't been confirmed yet that they may actually
check it as you would any other.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Glad to be with you, but updating the situation at Fort Lauderdale International Airport, where a shooting has taken the lives of at least 5 people. At least 8 people have been wounded, and at this point, they've just held a news conference. They're not going to say much about the shooting. They can say only that the shooting occurred, that there was one shooting at the airport when there had been previous reports of several different, or at least a couple of different scenes for shootings. The sheriff, Scott Israel, was very clear about this. There was one place where shooting happened, in the baggage claim area. There has been an identification of a man, but it comes from Senator Bill Nelson, who's a U.S. Senator from Florida, and he says that the man's name is Esteban Santiago. Nothing more than that, and the sheriff would not even confirm the name of the suspect, nor the weapon used, nor the number of shots fired. And in fact, I don't believe the sheriff even talked about the specific number of victims, but we're told that 5 are dead and 8 are wounded. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. As we get new information, we will bring it to you as we know it, but that's what we know at this point. But we thought that it would be helpful to talk to somebody who's an expert in active shooting situations, and that's Michele Byington with U.S. Law Shield. She's an attorney. Ms. Byington, it's good to have you back on the program, and thanks very much for taking the time on short notice today.
Of course, Lars.
So we don't know that much about what happened here, nor the motive. The sheriff was asked about it, but he said they're not going to talk about whatever they might know at this point about motive. But let's talk about what people should do if they find themselves in an active shooter situation in a public place like an airport.
Absolutely. So the FBI endorsed and Homeland Security endorsed action to take for those who find themselves, unfortunately, in an active shooter situation is run, hide, fight. So first option, run, get out of there, because if you get out of the area, then that's less targets for the active shooter to hit, which means less casualties. Unfortunately, if you don't have the luxury of running, then hide. And if you can hide yourself behind something that will withstand a bullet, that is preferable. So concrete columns, behind the engine block of a car, places like that can sustain a bullet, as opposed to drywall where a bullet will just go right through that and penetrate an individual. If you don't have the luxury of hiding, then you go to the third method, which is fight, which is where you attack the individual in order to save your life and the life of others.
And only in those situations where you can't either get away or hide do you try to fight back against an individual. But there may be cases where that's what you have to do. And in some cases, we hear about heroic stories where people have been able to fight back, and it's effective as long as you're disrupting what the killer is doing.
Absolutely, and studies have shown that any sort of pressure put on an active shooter either causes them to stop or turn the gun on themselves. So, studies have shown after study that any sort of pressure applied to this active shooter, so whether it be a group of people swarming him or a person goes and attacks the weapon in order to gain access to the weapon, a lot of times that individual will just crater under that sort of pressure.
Michele, let me ask you about something else, and I may be indelicate in asking this, but For instance, I'm looking at some of the live feed pictures from Fort Lauderdale Airport, and I see people out on the tarmac who are clearly evacuated out of the terminal, straight out to the tarmac, which is unusual. Many of them are dragging their luggage with them. And it makes me wonder, should you try to have in your mindset that if you're ever in one of these situations, leave your stuff behind. Just unless it's already in your hands, leave your stuff behind, because it seems strange to me that somebody would say, no, I need my little rolly bag to go with me. It might actually slow you down.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even if you were in a restaurant or if you're in an airport, any of your personal items that are there, let them go. Grab your children, grab your loved ones, and get out of there and forget about your personal items, because you're exactly right. It's just going to slow you down. It's going to be one more hindrance between you getting to safety quicker.
And the other thing about mindset, let me ask you about this. In airports, I fly 6 or 8 times a year for work mostly. But if you find yourself in this airport and there's a shooter, a bad guy, somebody who's posing a threat to your family, and you're, say, over at the gift shop, your family is on the far side, obviously families want to go to their family first and then leave. But if you've got to cross that active shooter area where the bad guy is, where the shots are coming from, does it make more sense to tell your family, in a case like this, head the opposite direction from the bad guy, even if I'm on the opposite side, we'll hook up later on?
Right. So this is where having a plan is crucial. You need to talk to your loved ones about what to do if somebody comes in here and there's an active shooter situation. You go out that exit no matter what, and point to the exit you're talking about, and say, if I'm not with you, that's the exit that I will be heading towards if I can, but this is the safe location that I want us to meet at. I'll see you there, sort of a thing. But yeah, it all comes down to talking with the people around you about this hard to talk about subject and having a plan on what to do. So in the situation where there is just mass chaos around you, you've got a plan, stick with the plan, execute it in order to save your life and your family's life.
See, I just think it would be a tough thing to do, to say my family's over there in the waiting area, I'm over here taking one of my children to the restroom or whatever, and an active shooter happens in between us, and separates us. Get away from the shooter. Don't try to go and reunite with somebody if it's going to cause you to be in greater risk or greater hazard.
Absolutely. That's the smart thing to do, is to go ahead and if you're already divided, do not try to reunite. You just need to, at that point, save your own life and the one you got with you at that point in time. And again, it just comes down to talking with your spouse and saying, this is our plan, this is what we're going to do if this happens, and carrying through with it, because you're going to be putting your life in even more danger if you try to cross the baggage claim area in order to get to your spouse. You may become one of those casualties by attempting to reunite. So we have to remember to keep our wit and our common sense about us in one of these chaotic situations.
Michele Byington is with me from U.S. Law Shield, who's a program attorney, and U.S. Law Shield conducts active shooter workshops nationwide, and you regularly advise lobbyists about firearms and self-defense issues. Let me ask you about this. What's been the experience? I tried to imagine in the minutes or the hour immediately after this, I would imagine that everyone in that airport is going to immediately try to make phone calls to family and friends, either to hook up with their family at the airport, after all the chaos has ensued, or to call somebody away from the airport and say, look, I'm at the airport, but I'm okay. I mean, I would imagine that probably overloads most of the cell capability in an area when everyone in an airport immediately opens up a phone.
Oh, absolutely. Communication may be difficult. And something else to remember is that in one of these scenarios, you don't need to be having a cell phone in your hand or anything else in your hand, because when the police come in, if you are still in that active zone, they're looking for someone with a black object in their hand, and many of our phones are black and are the size of a handgun. So it's incredibly important to make sure that your hands are empty when law enforcement comes in to secure that area. That's number one. Number two, and then once you're in this sort of non-threatening area where you are safe, you're going to want to make those phone calls, and if you can get through, it will be a miracle, because technology is only advanced so far.
Yeah, and I can imagine what it does to those cell systems. And so, and should a family have, say, a plan that our outside point of contact, if we're traveling and we can't reach each other, can you call mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or a coworker or somebody and tell your family, this is your point of contact. If you ever get separated from me, you call this number and this person.
Exactly, and have that phone number memorized. We are so dependent on our contact list for automatically putting in the phone number to Granny. Well, if your cell phone's not working, maybe you need to go to the Starbucks down the street who's got a landline that you can call from. So it's very, very important to have these emergency contact telephone numbers memorized.
Michele, one other issue, and this has to do with your policy role, where you talk to lawmakers and lobbyists and all about these things. Right now, the area on the other side of security, inside the terminal, is incredibly sanitized, or it's as sanitized as you can get by running everybody through TSA. But the front side of that is still completely unsanitized, if you will. In other words, anybody can walk into an American airport with anything. And I would suspect we're going to find out that this Esteban Sanchez walked into the airport, and had not been through security. He wasn't coming off an airplane with a firearm. He walked into the front door. I've been through a couple of other international airports where they have heavy security and they screen on the way into the terminal. Do you think we're going to see American lawmakers move to that and say we have to make the terminal area outside of security also somewhat sanitized?
Yeah, anytime there's a gun incident, the anti-gun activists are that's going to be their first reaction is we need another law to, quote unquote, fix this problem.
Right.
And unfortunately, I don't think there is any law on the books that would have prevented someone from doing this sort of horrendous, despicable act. If he could not have gotten into the airport specifically because say that we put the entire airport as an off limits to carrying a handgun.
Right.
What's going to stop him from being out in the front of the airport when everybody is getting out of their cars, hugging their loved ones, to open fire there? Unfortunately, because we live in this society where we have free will, terrible things are going to happen. And one more law on the books, one more gun law on the books is not going to prevent insane people from doing insane things.
Couldn't agree with you more. Michele, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program, although under these circumstances, with 5 people dead and at least 8 people wounded, it's a sad situation today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. My heart goes out to these people.
Absolutely. Say a prayer and spare a thought for the folks in Fort Lauderdale and all of those traveling and their families who've been affected by this. We'll be back in a moment. It's First Amendment Friday, and you're listening to The Lars Larson Show. Portland's best traffic is right here from Brett Recamp on FM News 101 KXL.
Lars, thank you so much. This traffic